what I normally do for your P3, I'll build this case adding more medications, more conditions into this case. See, this is a typical, it says somewhere is otherwise normal. I would put if a person is taking metformin, diabetic, or the person is also taking anti-cholesterol medications. Um, would there be, or the person came down with something from taking antibiotics, especially antibiotic containing the cyclosporine class of antibiotic. What would you do? What precautions do you tell this patient, advise this patient while taking those the quinolones, rather, not cyclosporine, quinolones, the antibiotics. So those are the things I build it and give you question on it. So it will be for you to apply your knowledge. Okay. These are the 4-5 areas I'm going to cover. First, give you an overview of the target sites, where this drug acts, which one acts where. Then we will talk about the chemistry of antacids, just like in here, chemistry is what are these divalent cations. Most of the antacids contain 1 or 2 metal ions, divalent ions or monovalent ions. Then we will talk about the H2RA antagonist, H2RA, proton pump inhibitors, and mucosal protective agents. This will contain misoprostol and the other sucralose. You know, see from the back that I zoomed it, so there will be some the bottom part. I will come to that later. Can you all see from the back? Okay. So the red marks, these are the places where these drugs act. H2RAs block the H2 receptor activation, and the proton pumps, they directly inhibit the proton pump, which is otherwise called biochemistry terminology. This is a HK-ATPase. You just say proton pump. And I'm not going to cover the H. pylori, and this is here, but the other targets down here, sucralfate and the misoprostol. I'll come to that in a minute. Remember, the H2 receptors can be activated by more than one agonist. Agonists like gastrin. Gastrin can activate histamine cell surface receptors, H2RA, H2, and they can increase the proton pump. They block the proton pump. Likewise, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine, these are the natural way how we increase the proton pump, activates. Acetylcholine, gastrin, and then histamine, they can activate H2 receptors, thereby proton pump is activated. That is the normal pathway. If we use the blockers, H2RAs, they block the activation of H2 receptors by any of these, acetylcholine, gastrin, or the histamine. So that's where the H2RAs come in. Now, in the natural pathway, how do we control this activation of pump? Or gastrin, food smell. Some people start secreting this gastric juice just by smelling the food. That is the gastrin receptor activation, acetylcholine activation, or histamine activation will lead to this. Naturally, we also make prostaglandins. Prostaglandins work in the opposite way. They control the proton pump activation. When the activation is happening. If there is prostaglandin, PGE, PGI2, they bind to the prostaglandin receptor, then they work in the opposite way, they decrease cyclic AMP. Remember, all these three, gastrin, acetylcholine, histamine, the histamine receptor activation causes increasing cyclic AMP that will cause the proton pump activation. Prostaglandins, they will decrease the cyclic AMP because their receptors are connected, are coupled to GI pathway. Remember the S and GI pathways in pharmacology? So PGE receptors are GPCRs, they are coupled through GI pathway. So naturally they decrease cyclic AMP, they inhibit cyclic AMP, thereby inhibit the proton pump. That's how we naturally control these proton pumps. Prostaglandin, the gastrin, acetylcholine, histamine, they activate proton pumps, and once they are activated, then the prostaglandins subsequently, they are secreted, they are coming in, they will block the proton pumps. So that is the balance, that's a homeostasis going on. If there is a compromise, something happened to this homeostatic equilibrium, that's when we need the blockers. That's when we need antacids, that's when we need the H2RAs and the PPIs. As the case builds, we need the powerful inhibitors of proton pump. Prostaglandins also, they have another function. Besides inhibiting proton pumps, they secrete they stimulate cells to secrete mucus. That mucus can protect the layer of the epithelial cells which are facing the lumen of the gut. So they are providing natural barrier for this HCl, the acid, so that the epithelial cells corrosion by the acid is minimized. If for some reason prostaglandin secretion is decreased or stopped in a patient, that can compromise the mucosal layer as well. The decrease in mucosal secretion can expose the epithelial cells to the acid secreted by the proton pumps. Okay. So that's the dual function of these prostaglandins that help reduce proton or reduce the acid in the by the secretion by the proton pumps, also by protecting the epithelial layer by stimulating secretion of the mucus. Any question on the natural or the pharmacology or physiological homeostasis for the acid secretion? Remember, if you put a patient for extended period, the prednisone. What prednisone, like steroid hormones. What steroid hormones do, they will block the secretion of the arachidonic acid from which these prostaglandins are produced. So extended period, extended treatment with the prednisone can compromise production of prostaglandins. That includes the PGA, PGI2. That will, what happens? Acid secretion will be uncontrolled because prostaglandin secretion is inhibited by the prednisone. It is at the top level. Release of arachidonic acid is compromised, and thereby prostaglandin synthesis is compromised as well. And that can create proton pumps going uncontrolled, increasing acidity. Also the mucus production is lessened, therefore the epithelial cells are exposed to the acid secretion. So that's how drugs like prednisone can affect or can increase the acid secretion by in the stomach, and also deteriorate the epithelial cells because they won't get the mucus protection which is otherwise produced by the prostaglandins. So what the antacids would do? Where is the target site? Antacids are just neutralizing agents. They will only affect when there is acid already secreted. Antacids will come in, they fizzle this out. Remember the neutralization in a test tube in your chemistry lab, and you add a base into acid, what happens? It fizzles. That fizzling effect is what's happening with the antacids, and they will neutralize the acid already secreted. They won't do anything to the H2 receptors or the proton pumps. They only act on the acid already secreted. They just neutralize. That's why you get a very short relief. If anything serious, then they won't help you. Antacids will not help you. Antacids, of course, give you quick relief. That is for sure. And since the proton pumps are already doing their job, there will be secretion of acid. And once the neutralizing effect is gone, you need to either take another tablet and neutralize again. That keeps on going. Okay. Antacids, when combined with alginic acid, there is another agent you can combine for some serious relief. Alginic acid gives you better results with antacids. What it does, it is more like a what should I say? You know, when the fizzling is going on, effervescence is coming out, that will make the level of the fluid goes out of the stomach. That comes to our esophageal area where you feel the acidity. That the alginic acid prevents it. It will prevent the forming of the foam or frothing effect, so that it will contain the neutralized acid, stay back in the stomach, not coming back to your throat. So that is what the alginic acid will do in combination with antacid. By itself, it doesn't have any. Antacids are all sorts of these divalent cations. Yes.
Yes, can I take you back to prostaglandin?
Okay.
Please, what's the function, the effect of prostaglandin on inflammation? You know, does it have anything?
Anti-inflammatory. They are anti-inflammatory, no doubt about it. Prostaglandins also, they have several other physiological functions. One of them here I'm discussing here is the prostaglandin's role in reducing the acid and protecting the epithelial layer of the gut. That's from the acid. So prostaglandins, besides anti-inflammatory function, they also have vascular function. Of course, Dr. Owen must have talked to you on this. They have vascular functions. Some of them vasoconstrictors, some of them vasodilators. So they have number of roles, and there are hundreds of these prostaglandins. They are not just PGE, PPI. I worked on these for my postdoctoral back in Virginia. So I have separated 57 of these prostaglandins by purification. That time we have to purify to find out their role, and that's how I also use a P450 pathway. There is a pathway P450, cytochrome P450 also works on the arachidonic acid and produces vasodilators. Some of them are vasodilators, they are called epoxides. So there is a cyclooxygenase pathway, leukotriene pathway, and the cytochrome P450 pathway. Three pathways for arachidonic acid metabolism, producing hundreds of these eicosanoids. They are all called eicosanoids. They all have different functions.
Thank you.
So if you treat with a non-specific drug like prednisone, all these prostaglandin production are all inhibited. Remember that. They'll all be inhibited. So that is why keeping the patient for longer time period with these steroid hormones is detrimental. They lose their physiological functions. Are there any other questions? So just know these antacids contain different metal ions, and that will help you decide if a person is taking quinolone antibiotic treatment temporarily, that until that quinolone treatment is over, you may want to watch out magnesium supplying these divalent cations. Why? Because these divalent cations make chelator. They are chelating agents. What they do, they react with the antibiotic, they chelate it, so that the antibiotic would not get into the system, so the antibiotic's function is compromised. So that's what an important thing here is to drug-drug interaction here in antacids, certain divalent cations are detrimental for the patient who is on antibiotics. Some of them contain both aluminum and magnesium, such as mylanta, gelusil, etc. For Tums, calcium. That Tums is more of a non, I would say, there is no side effect, adverse effects with Tums, except person may run into hypercalcemia. But we need calcium a lot for even the old people, young people, everyone needs calcium. Therefore, Tums is okay to take for a longer time period, except this hypercalcemia condition. But if you can take aluminum, magnesium containing, both of them are at higher doses, they cause diarrhea, etc. side effects. They cause osmotic diarrhea. Small amounts of aluminum magnesium absorbed systemically and accumulate in patients with renal insufficiency. That's also something for you to watch out. Magnesium antacid should be avoided for patients with creatinine clearance. That's another side effect which you may want to advise your patients. Chronic use of aluminum containing antacids will probably lead to renal failure and therefore should be avoided. High doses of calcium antacids may cause hypercalcemia, but this is, as I said, rare condition to occur. But there is something on hypophosphatemia. Aluminum containing antacids interfere with the absorption of phosphate. You know, the phosphate is an important organic material required for all the biochemical reactions, cellular and systemic, so they may want to watch out. They may run into hypophosphatemia condition. Antacids may also interfere with the absorption of many orally administered drugs that require an acidic environment. That is also something you may want to watch out. The last one is the chelation. That's quinolones. While taking quinolones, you may want to avoid the divalent containing antacids, magnesium containing, calcium containing, any antacids. That is detrimental for the quinolones class. Then we'll move on to H2RS. So these antacids are temporary relief. They won't do anything to the H2 receptors or the proton pump. they only neutralize the acid already secreted into the gut. So what we can do in case of persistent the acid reflux in GERD cases, you can up to treatment going into H2RAs. These H2RAs are antihistamines and they block the H2 receptor activation by gastrin, acetylcholine, and histamine. All three activations can be blocked by H2RA antagonists. So H2 receptor activation blockade will cause similar cyclic AMP production, decrease in cyclic AMP production, which will cause decrease in the secretion of acid by proton pump. So it is more like upstream regulation. So the regulation comes at the receptor level, so the acid secretion will be effectively blocked by proton pumps. Because less cyclic AMP means less proton pump activation. PPIs, on the other hand, they block the proton pumps. That's where the acid is secreting, so they work at the end of the pathway, that is the root cause for the accumulation of HCl. So that is, they inhibit proton pumps. It's called hydrogen potassium ATPase. It is similar to sodium potassium ATPase. Remember, sodium potassium ATPase, they act like transporters of sodium. They play a role in the central nervous system. Likewise, these proton pumps also play a role in the gut. That's where the hydrogens are hydrogen ions. Protons are released into the gut. How are they released? They are released as hydronium ions, H3Os. If the H plus cannot come out of the membrane, H3O, water molecule plus an H plus will give you H3O. That is what the acid is. Then proton, in exchange for protons, potassium is moved into the epithelial cells. So they are antiporters. Remember those anti-symporter, antiporters in the biochem. So the protons will come out of the cell in exchange for a potassium. So one proton to one potassium. That is the stoichiometric. So if you inhibit the proton pump, it also inhibits the potassium going into the cells. And the proton pump can be activated by gastrin, histamine, or the acetylcholine with respective receptors. Gastrin receptors, histamine receptors, and the M3 receptors. All the H2RAs, they inhibit the H2 receptors. As I mentioned earlier, this pump can also be inhibited naturally. You may want to add naturally by agonists like prostaglandins, which belong to GPCR. The prostaglandins activate the GPCR, their specific GPCRs, which are coupled to GI protein, which will inhibit cyclic AMP production. So the pathway is opposite to H2 receptor activation. Okay? That's the natural way how we control acid secretion in our stomach, as I mentioned earlier. Now, what are the H2 receptor antagonists? You already know these names. I'm going to talk about the first generation. It stopped, like cimetidine and virilmide. They are the first generation and cimetidine was a little bit modified, and then because of the cimetidine has some side effects, serious side effects, the second generation H2RAs came in, and they are the ranitidine, famotidine, and nizatidine. These drugs inhibit histamine, gastrin, and acetylcholine-stimulated acid secretion from the parietal cells. Just here you're testing your background, your biochem knowledge. Histamine is derived from which amino acid? Histidine. So simple. Remember, histidine is the amino acid from which histamine is made. By what? By what enzyme? What was the histidine is losing what? What functional group? To become histamine. Chemistry. Decarboxylases. What they do, decarboxylases remove the carboxyl group from the histidine. Then after losing the carboxylic group, histidine becomes histamine. Remember, it has an alpha amino group too. So there is an alpha carboxyl group, alpha amino group, that is histidine, and after losing carboxylic group, it will have an amino group, so it becomes histamine. Okay. In histidine, if you remember the structure of histidine, here is the imidazole ring. Imidazole ring is the core of the histidine amino acid. Of course, it loses the carboxylic acid and it becomes histamine. And it's, the side chain has been added, so here is the modifications done. So any modifications at regions like R for the intact imidazole is important for the histamine to act on the receptor, H2 receptor. Of course, there is some, it will be acting on H1 histamine receptor. There are three receptors, right? Histamine receptors, H1, H2, H3. So H1 is more central effect. H2 is in the acid secretion business. Likewise, H3 also is in central doing something else. Now, for a H2 receptor specific effect, the histamine's imidazole ring is so important. So you can modify the side chains of the ring structure. So if you in the R here, say buriamide is the parent compound. Cimetidine, what they did, they modified, they added say amino methyl group into the R, and that will make it what? If you change C4 here, it will increase the selectivity. Therefore, cimetidine is more selective than buriamide because there is a methyl group in the R position. And there is an S atom. If you add an S atom here, as in the case of cimetidine, that will make it potent. So potency, selectivity are increased in cimetidine because of the modifications at R and X with the methyl group and the sulfur group respectively. And they decrease the basicity by adding the cyanoguanidine group into the Y here. So attaching the cyanoguanidine, it made the compound decrease its basicity. Okay? So those are the modifications led to the production of second generation H2RAs such as ranitidine, nizatidine, and in case of famotidine, there is more modifications. They replace the imidazole ring with a heteroatomic ring structures. So then they thought we don't need the imidazole ring, we can play with it, replace it with heteroatom ring like the oxygen containing ring here in case of ranitidine, a sulfur nitrogen containing ring, a nizatidine, and I think there is the famotidine has altogether a bigger structure replacing the imidazole ring. So that made the second generation drugs less side effects. They target more specifically to the H2 receptors, and they won't do anything to our H1, so you don't feel drowsiness or anything because the brain H1 receptors are not affected by these. And potency wise, famotidine is more potent than any of these three. Famotidine is the most potent, then ranitidine is the least potent. Oral absorption in this small intestine is a little bit, there is some absorption in the small intestine, but the bioavailability of famotidine and ranitidine is only 40 to 60%. The rest of the drug goes into first pass, liver, they were degraded in the liver more rapidly. Therefore, you need to take them more frequently. And all these H2RAs are competitive inhibitors of H2 receptors. Remember in your biochemistry, competitive, non-competitive, uncompetitive categories we talked about. There's that fits the H2RAs fit into competitive inhibitors. That means when the concentration of the inhibitor is high, it works. As soon as its concentration goes down, they lose the histamine, the natural agonists will take over, they start secreting, activating the proton pumps. So you have to keep on replenishing the H2RAs frequently so that you can keep the acid secretion in check. Adverse side effects, there is not much, they are pretty safe, except some of them, because of the reduction in acidity in the stomach, the drugs such as ketoconazole, antifungal drug, absorption or its activity become compromised. So because that needs an acid environment for its absorption. Cimetidine is also known to inhibit several hepatic cytochrome P450s. That is the major drawback for cimetidine. That's why cimetidine, I don't know whether they prescribe or not. These days, it is all the other second generation famotidine, ranitidine, nizatidine are the preferred H2RAs. Are there any questions on H2RAs which I did not address? You can ask me now before we move on to the chemistry of PPIs. Remember, all H2RAs, they need to have that imidazole ring or a substituted heteroatomic ring structure for them to work on H2 receptors. So that is a must. And then some side chain modifications can increase the potency, increase the selectivity, such as in case of cimetidine or the heteroatomic ring is true for all three second generation. That leads to the formation of second generation. They don't have the imidazole ring, but they have different heteroatomic ring structure. PPIs. The PPIs, as I mentioned earlier, unlike H2RAs, PPIs are irreversible inhibitors once they bind to the proton pump, if the proton pump is gone, it becomes non-functional for its life. So a new proton pump needs to be synthesized. Remember the molecular biology you studied, there should be a signal which activates the gene for the production of proton pump RNA, mRNA. Then it needs to go to the protein synthesis. A protein synthesis will make the new proton pump. Then it will be translocated to its destination, which is the epithelial parietal cell, the stomach. So that many steps it has to follow. So the new proton pump has to be put in place for the parietal cells to secrete any new acid. Okay? So that's how much effective these PPIs are. That's why normally your therapeutics probably better than the medicated PPIs early in the morning, because they are also prodrugs. They are not readily active drugs. When they come in as inactive drug molecules. They need to be activated by the acid, very acid which they are going to inhibit the secretion. So they need initial acidic medium. So the best time is to take them in the early morning when we have empty stomach and much more acid is secreted, and the pH of the stomach acid is at that level is so low. So that lowest pH, that means high acidity environment, will make these proton pumps activated. I'll show you what the activation step is. When they become activated, then they will bind to the proton pump. Then they will decrease or inhibit the production or release of gastric acids. So the best time to take a PPI is early in the morning. Once you take it, the effect can last longer. 24, 36, there are 48 hours, they last that long. So until then, there won't be any new acid secretion. Then remember what happens. We eat. When we eat, we need acid for digestion. Well, what the acid will do, it will denature proteins in the diet. That is a critical step for protein to get digested further in the small intestine. The denaturation should occur. That step would not occur in the patient taking the PPI. When the pH is higher in the stomach, there is no acidity required for the digestion or denaturation of protein. That protein digestion is compromised in these patients when they are in PPI. And it takes longer time for them to get back the acid needed. And that makes it what? These microbes. We ingest microbes from our diet. Along with our diet, we also ingest lots of microbes in their cyst form or in their active form. Guess where they are destroyed? They are destroyed by the acidic medium in the stomach. They will all be killed. So in a patient taking the PPI, there is not much acidity. The pH of the stomach is about 6, pH 6, almost neutral. At that point, these microbes can get away from the stomach, go into intestine, and then they get absorbed, then lead to the infections. So people taking PPI on a regular basis are subject to opportunistic microbial attacks. So they get infections quite frequently. Yes.
So aside from the infection, being prone to infection, is also can cause weight gain. Is that commonly seen in patients with taking PPIs, weight gain, because you're now not being able to metabolize or digest?
Oh yeah, weight gain, you mean
Yes.
Oh, okay, it could be possible. But the digestion is compromised, especially protein digestion is compromised in these patients, and they are subject to infection because of the microbes surviving in that neutral medium. So it is needed. And chemicals, these are benzimidazoles. They are not imidazole ring structure. They are benzene imidazoles. Benzimidazole derivatives, and they are what they do. They covalently bind to the proton pumps. Where do they bind to? They bind to the SH groups in cysteine residues. Remember, all cysteine amino acids containing proteins, they have an SH in their site group. That SH is the binding site for these proton pump inhibitors in the proton pump. And they undergo covalent binding. Covalent binding means it's irreversible. Covalent binding cannot be removed unless there is an enzyme to degrade them. Therefore, they become irreversible inhibitors. They are benzimidazoles. Specifically, they are pyridyl methyl sulfonyl benzimidazoles. One thing I forgot to mention before, in this PPI, there are two classifications now. There are the classical, traditional ones are the irreversible inhibitors which I talked about. There is another class coming up, but I don't think they are in the clinical use. They are investigational right now. How about a reversible proton pump inhibitor? Because the drawbacks I told you, by permanently inhibiting the proton pumps, you are making the patient vulnerable for microbial attacks, also the compromise in the digestion of proteins in the diet. So in order to overcome these two disadvantages, make them reversible inhibitors just like H2RAs. They come and bind to the proton pump. When the concentration of the drug is high, they inhibit the proton pumps. When they are metabolized, the concentration goes down and the acid secretion resumes. So there is no need for a new proton pump to be synthesized starting from the gene activation. So that is the plus point, having a reversible inhibitor of proton pump inhibitors. Not much success. Where is the target? Unlike the irreversible inhibitors, they don't bind to the cysteine SH groups. They shouldn't bind, they shouldn't make a covalent binding. They should bind reversibly. A non-covalent binding is preferred, or what we have, whatever the investigational drug we know, it affects the potassium exchange. Remember, in the proton pump, each hydrogen comes out, is released to the lumen. One proton, potassium is sent inside the parietal cells. What if you block that potassium going in? If the potassium doesn't go in, protons will not come out. Okay, so that is the basis for making a reversible proton pump. Reversible proton pump, they are also called acid pump antagonists, because these are proton pumps are acid secreting, and they are APAs. And one investigational drug is called, there is a number, I don't think they have named it, but again, it is investigational right now. So let's talk about the irreversible pump inhibitors, chemistry of it. They contain these benzimidazoles, and they need activation. They are prodrugs, so they need acid environment for their activation. So you have to take them well in advance. That means early morning, we go in the empty stomach. That way they get converted to the active drugs by the acidic environment of the stomach. So they are unique compared H2RAs. Their name ends with zoles, omeprazole, esomeprazole, tenacloprazole, lansoprazole, rabeprazole, and pantoprazole. And they are all because of the substitutions in these X, R1, R2, R3, R4 places. One unique thing is about here, these compounds have an S atom, which is chiral. Only one kind, the S minus, that means remember the plus sign minus signs in the chiral compounds, they are the S minus, which is the esomeprazole. This is the S enantiomer of omeprazole. Omeprazole, when they ran out of the patent, these the manufacturers, they came up with the idea. They knew the structure. It has the racemic form, both plus and negative are there. The negative is the active compound. What they did, when they ran out of the patent, to retain the patent, they purified this, removed the R component from the S component. The S component became esomeprazole, so they could retain the patent for further on. So that's why the Nexium is also called a mirror drug. For a lay person's perspective, we call it Nexium is a mirror drug of omeprazole. So that's how the Nexium was released as a brand new drug, more effective than omeprazole because they removed the inactive component, and so milligrams together, low milligram levels, it gave the effect as a PPI. Remember, you all renew the chiral centers are always carbon. Some of you may know there are other nitrogen, sulfur, they also can cause chirality. They can make these enantiomers. So one of the examples of this chiral forms is the proton pump inhibitors, omeprazole and esomeprazole. I just want to know this, the ring structure here is not imidazole, it is the benzimidazole, benzene containing imidazole. Then what is the activation step required? What happens here? That's in the next slide. And the mechanism, it doesn't matter what the activation route is, whether the proton pump is activated by histamine or gastrin or acetylcholine, it will be inhibited. No matter what the activation route is, but the proton pump is inhibited by this PPI by direct covalent modifications. These are sulfoxides, and they have a chiral sulfur. The esomeprazole I have it here. This is an enantiomer of omeprazole, and this is what the activation step is needed. Ionization of benzimidazole PPIs depends on the acidity in the medium. So here is the imidazole ring. The nitrogen here, it will be NH form, unionized at pHs like 0.89. So highly acidic medium will keep this as NH. The moment pH goes up, it will be, it's still at 3.96, it's still a pH, acidic pH. It has a weak base property. It will lose its proton. And that's the imidazole ring, and that is this activation step required for this here the more protons will make this NH unionized form. As a base, it accepts a proton. As the pH increases, it becomes ionized, therefore it will not be active. So that's why highly pH medium is required for the compound to become unionized. As a base, it accepts a proton from the medium, and that is the activation step required for the PPIs. Going a little more further, how this ionization makes the compound active. The weakly basic benzimidazole PPIs are chemically converted by the acidic medium into sulfonamide. This is the sulfonamide structure, and there is a ring formation, and the protonated form is required for this sulfonamide ring formation. And that will, if that happens, the sulfur atom containing sulfonamide can bind covalently with the enzyme, SH group of the enzyme, the cysteine SH group of the enzyme, make a covalent bond formation. That way it will stay there covalently. Therefore, this ionization is important. That will make the sulfonamide, which can bind to the cysteine sulfide groups of the enzyme. So the active form is the sulfonamide. It is not sulfonamide. Please check your spellings. This is sulfonamide. For the conversion, these products require an actively secreting proton pump. Then only they can act. And then the PPIs are superiors. They don't have, they may have some dosage reduction is not required for renal insufficiency, but it is required for hepatic impairment. Patients with hepatic dysfunction require lower doses of the PPI. They may have some interactions with the cytochrome P450 metabolism of other drugs. And PPIs have been associated with increased risk of infections due to the less acidic medium environment, as I mentioned earlier. There is something else, the B12 absorption down the road when the PPI is on a chronic basis, the B12 absorption is compromised. And latest, recently, there is some connection, we don't know yet. The patients taking PPIs, they have a tendency to develop dementia and depression as a central effect. Whether we don't know whether it is direct the consequence of these PPIs, or is it a coincidence? Still it is investigation. It's ongoing investigation. Then the competitive PPIs, they probably will help, but we still don't have a clinical drug which is available. These are investigational drugs. One of them is BY841, which, as I mentioned earlier, it interferes with the potassium transport into the parietal cell. It blocks the potassium transport, therefore acid secretion would not occur. They are together. One goes out, the other one comes in. If the one is blocked, the other one will be automatically blocked. So that's the basis for the newer drugs, reversible, and that way it will probably.
Hi, Dr. Shivachar.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I will sum up.
Thank
I'm
you very
almost
much.
done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that is the reversible anti-RNA, reversible inhibitor PPIs. and little bit on mucosal protective agents, which I mentioned earlier. See, the prostaglandins are good, natural blockers of the PPI proton pumps. However, they are short-lived. What do they have? They have a carboxylic group. Any decarboxylase enzyme can remove. The moment they lose the carboxyl group, they become inactive. That's why prostaglandins are short-lived. So the mesoprostol is synthesized by just doing the esterification. The carboxyl group is blocked by esterification. When it is esterified, it stays. The carboxylase cannot act on the esterified group. Therefore, mesoprostol is stable analog of prostaglandin E1, and it can give you long-lasting inhibition of the PI. The other thing is the same mesoprostol can increase the mucus secretion, and that can protect the lining of the cells. Yes.
Do you mind going back one slide, that bottom right, portion of that sentence is not within our, yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. This for longer time period than its natural counterpart. That is, I added it while reading. That it made sense for me why mesoprostol is better than the prostaglandin E1, because it stays longer. Therefore, it gives you long-lasting effect. It is mesoprostol is a methylated analog of PPI. Okay, then sucral fat. I'll skip this, and you already know. There is a synthetic mucus-like forming compound, which is called sucral fat or carafat. It is a polysaccharide consisting of octosulfate group of sucrose with aluminum oxide has been added. So this synthetic mucus forming agent stimulates the prostaglandin induced mucus, so it will protect the parietal cells from the act of the acid. So it is more helpful to treat the PUD, the peptic ulcer disease patients. So if there is an ulceration, you can try to treat with the sucral fat. That will help you give relief. And I'm going to stop at this. It is what you have to focus on. I have here go with the is taken from Medchem, and also I used the Cora Kimbo. Then the objective 1, 2, and 3. That is the areas to focus on. Major 2 and 3. Depending upon how many questions I get, if I get, because it's integrated now, you don't get a lot of questions. If I get a few questions, then I will focus mainly on the chemistry part of it and the 2 and 3. I will not go into 1 because it is covered in somewhere else. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry,